I've always felt that there's something uniquely special about the original Disneyland theme park. Something that not even Disneyland's neighbor, California Adventure, has really been able to replicate. And apart from some fabled Walt Disney magic, I've never really understood what that is. But I think I might be onto something. Disneyland is congested, and really it always has been. When Walt Disney originally bought land for Disneyland, he was able to get 160 acres of what was previously orange groves to build Disneyland on top of. But spoiler alert, I think the congestion is exactly what makes Disneyland so uniquely special when compared to the other parks. You see, today Disneyland itself occupies 85 acres, but if you look at the newest Disney park in Shanghai Disney occupies 963 acres. That is over 11 times bigger than the original Disneyland is today. But then if you look at the ride counts, Shanghai Disney currently has 17 rides, while Disneyland has over 33 rides crammed into those 85 acres. Now, I need to concede two things before we go any farther. First off, yes, Shanghai Disney is much newer, and it's entirely possible, given their space, that someday it will outnumber the rides at Disneyland. And the second thing is that congestion is not always a good thing. And before you start thinking that I'm just jaded and love Disneyland because it's my home park, I will admit that full capacity is an absolute nightmare at Disneyland. I'm sure we've seen pictures of Christmas Day and of high capacity crowds where it just looks like a miserable time to move 2 feet in any direction. And I don't think that's good. And that's exactly why newer Disney parks have much bigger walkways. But now let's look at a video walkthrough of Shanghai Disneyland. You see, the walkways are huge and the landscaping, it's beautiful. Like, it's really well done, but there's also kind of a lack of theming. If you look at Fantasyland, there's some fantasy buildings over here with a lot of nothing in between. You don't really feel like you're in a medieval village because there's not supposed to be 100,000 people able to fit into one medieval village, whereas Disneyland has these tight, narrow corridors. We're looking at some video of walking through Disneyland now, and you can see the theming is so tight knit. You're always somewhere because the theming is so close together. In such a huge open space like Shanghai, you can't really add intricate, detailed theming to each and every corner the way you can in Disneyland. And while yes, the crowds are more constricting and more noticeable in the tight corridors of Disneyland, the theming is more noticeable as well, which gives you a deeper sense of immersion. And despite tight crowds and potentially long wait times, which are also even longer in Shanghai, you always feel like you're somewhere in Disneyland, and I think that is what makes it truly special. Now, most of us, myself included, have not been to Shanghai Disney, but a lot more of us have been to both Disneyland and Disney World. So let's compare those two. Disney World Magic Kingdom, that is coming in at 107 acres with 22 rides versus Disneyland's 85 acres and 30 plus rides. So let's walk around Fantasyland a bit. Again, in Disneyland, pretty compact, lots of detailing around every corner. Disney World has a lot more open courtyard space, which is nice, I will admit, for getting around and moving around, but you lose some of that sense of immersion. And I think this is most prevalent when comparing Adventureland in Disneyland to Adventureland in the Magic Kingdom. In Disneyland, Adventureland is one of the most immersive places in the whole park. Granted, it's also one of the most congested places in the whole park, which they've been working on with the Tropical Hideaway and expanding the gate and expanding Bengal Barbecue. But if you look at a walkthrough of Adventureland in Disneyland, or if you walk through it on your own, you feel like you're in the jungle. And now these trees have had 50 some years to grow, so they've really crept over and tightened in on the corridors, but the corridors themselves are narrow. And that, I feel, is the sense of Adventureland. This deep in the jungle, you found this one jungle outpost full of all the travelers coming through, but you really feel immersed. You can't see outside of the jungle, but you're in it and you're living in that space. Whereas over in the Magic Kingdom, Adventureland is not my favorite spot. It's a lot of flat ground, a lot of open ground. There's some cool decor, admittedly, with some of the totem statues. The Jungle Cruise is looking good, but there's a lot of concrete plaza, which you don't even notice the concrete you're walking on in Disneyland. In my opinion, you're too busy looking at all the detail that's above and around you. But with so much space in the Magic Kingdom, you can't really have that detail creeping in on you in the same way. And so you lose some of that immersion. So in summary, my message is not that new Disney parks should go back to tight quarters. I think the open space is very necessary, given how popular all of these parks have been becoming in the past decade. But I personally prefer the congestion just for the sense of immersion. I think crowds are awful, and being that tight in with people, I'm not gonna sit here and argue is a good thing, but the congestion, I think, is the reason Disneyland stands out so uniquely against every other Disney park. There's nothing quite like it because the people who developed the newer parks knew how many people were gonna be there, so obviously they made it bigger. But Disneyland being forced to work with this small 80-some acres and squeeze as much as they can into this most popular Disney park has really led to that unique feeling that I personally think no other park has been able to replicate. So whether your favorite park is Magic Kingdom or Epcot or Tokyo, Disney Sea, I still would argue, I'm not arguing it's necessarily better, but I would argue that the reason Disneyland feels so different and so charming is because it is so congested. I hope you enjoyed it, but I will see you next week with looking like there's gonna be a Versus next week, so mark it on your calendar. Get a little pen, get a little Sharpie, get a little calendar. Versus. I'll see you then, but until then, enjoy your time. Tell me how to end a video in the comments below. No one's done that yet, so I still don't know.